Representatives, I'll call the House to order. This morning, the prayer will be given by Representative Marie Polson. The pledge will be led by Drew Martin, Walker Harris, Yanni Paulos, Matthew Earl, Brandon Badger, and Brennan Potter, third grade students at Butler Elementary School in the Canyons District. I invite all those in the chamber as well as the gallery to please stand for the prayer and the pledge.
Our Father in heaven, we're gathered here today as representatives, deeply grateful for the honor and the opportunity we have to be here to serve the people of Utah. We express appreciation for all those who work in this body, for the Greencoats and our interns and pages and clerks, and for our legislative research staff and all those whose professionalism and dedication make this House run smoothly. Please bless them for their efforts. Father, we ask Thee for Thy inspiration as legislators as we face some very difficult decisions today. Please bless us that we will be ever mindful of the impact of those decisions on the people that we serve. Bless us with wisdom and compassion and empathy. Bless us to be respectful of differing opinions and civil in our discourse one with another. And above all, please bless the citizens of this great state and help them to know of our concern for them. These favors and blessings we ask humbly in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Will you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you. Representatives, please mark the roll. Representative Polson?
Personal privilege.
Personal privilege granted.
Thank you. I would like to take the opportunity to introduce the third grade class from Butler Elementary School who's in our gallery today, if they'd please stand. I'm really excited to have them with us today. This is my neighborhood school, the school where all 5 of my children attended, and just a great example of an excellent school. And we want to welcome 79-year-olds with us today, and I hope that they enjoy observing the public process.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Chavez-Hauk?
Personal privilege, please.
Personal privilege granted.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representatives, I just want to take a few moments this morning to honor one of our community's business leaders. It was very sad yesterday to hear about the tragic killing of Richard Werwick, who is the owner of the Oxford shoe shop, and he was a constituent of mine. He was killed in a tragic bus pedestrian accident. If those of you who don't know Dick, he was a fixture in downtown Salt Lake and a strong, fierce advocate for our small business men and women and for promoting the city's business district, especially our small, more distinct shops. We called him Mr. Downtown. He had owned and operated the Oxford shoe shop on First South and 65 West for more than 60 years, and he was still working there. I dropped there this morning to pay my respects, and there's a growing memorial there of flowers and people paying their respects there at the store. Many men and boys in our community remember getting their first pair of shoes at the Oxford shop, and Dick always paid close attention to detail with all of his customers, but he also was very, very strongly committed to supporting other business men and women in the community and downtown. He always attended our community council meetings, asked very thoughtful questions, and held us as public officials to account on the many issues regarding downtown regulation of businesses and taking care of our community. In 2010, Dick was honored with the Downtown Alliance's coveted Achievement Award in recognition for his relentless pursuit of the betterment of downtown Salt Lake City, and he's received numerous accolades through the years. I just wanted to take a brief moment this morning to honor Dick and what he's contributed to our community, to offer our condolences to his family, and thank him for what he gave to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Oda.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, we have some personal privilege. Thank you. I'm sorry. We have amongst us some special guests from Hill Air Force Base. We have the 388th Fighter Wing Commander, Colonel Scott Kimo Long. He's one of the, well, he's what you call the epitome of a fighter, fighter pilot. Incredible, great. I don't know how to describe you, Scott. You're great. You're wonderful. We also have his the commander's administrative assistant, Julie Schmidt, who's sitting with me, and we have Andrea Mason, who's his public affairs assistant. Representative Brad Wilson is Commander Long's honorary commander currently. Representative Kaiser is also an honorary commander with the wing, and I'm a former honorary commander. I'm now in the Falcon Club. So please welcome these fine people into our chamber. We really want to thank them for their service. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Ivory.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Personal privilege.
Personal privilege granted.
May I please have the folks from American Heritage School stand up? We have here a number of budding statesmen and stateswomen from grades 4 through 8 from the American Heritage School in South Jordan. They spent a few minutes earlier here teaching me how our governing partnership is like a bicycle. And so if you have any questions about that, you can talk to them later. If you'd please join me in welcoming them to the Capitol.
Representative Kaiser.
Personal privilege, please.
Personal privilege granted.
I just want to piggyback a little bit onto what Kurt Oda was trying to do. Many of you know that I have a military background as a dependent, but not as a career or a. But so I've seen a lot of the military as a dependent. But my father was primarily a dentist in the military, in the Air Force, so I didn't see what we call a line officer. And Kimo was looking at me a little confused. A line officer is someone who stands up and directly directs combat. My dad got that opportunity in World War II as a Navy fighter pilot. And so I've seen a little bit of two worlds. One is a line officer and one is a supporting. My experience with the honorary commander at Hill Air Force Base for the 388th has been very interesting from this perspective, because I'm seeing men and women who are line officers and supporting enlisted servicemen who are here to protect our freedoms. And I have never sensed that like I have sensed it the past several months as I've been involved with the 388. And I want them to know how much I appreciate their commitment, their honor, their integrity, and their service to protect our freedoms, our rights, and liberties. The fact that they are prepared at an instant to get on a fighter and go protect my freedoms has really affected me. And I just want to say thanks. They're not here today. We just have 3 of them, but I want them to know how much I appreciate them, and this body to know how much I respect and honor them. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Kaiser. I'll declare that we have a quorum present. Madam Reading Clerk, for communications from the Senate.
February 21st, 2012. Madam Speaker, the Senate passed as amended House Bill 13, Offender Registry Review by Representative Draxler. Passed as amended First Substitute House Bill 61, Portable Electronics Insurance-Related Amendments by Representative Kaiser. And passed as amended First Substitute House Bill 253, Voter Registration Amendments by Representative Powell. These bills are transmitted for further consideration. Respectfully, Leslie McLean, Secretary of the Senate.
Thank you, Madam Reading Clerk. These bills will be placed on the concurrence calendar for further consideration. Madam Reading Clerk.
February 21st, 2012. Madam Speaker, the Senate passed as amended Senate Bill 27, Amendments to Revenue and Taxation Title by Senator H. Stevenson, and it is transmitted for consideration. Respectfully, Leslie McLean, Secretary of the Senate.
Thank you, Madam Reading Clerk. This bill will be considered read for the first time and is referred to the Rules Committee. Madam Reading Clerk, for introduction of bills.
House Bill 173, Transportation Funding Modifications, Representative D. House Bill 335, Professional Licensing Amendments, Representative Dugal. House Bill 337, Open Government Amendments, Representative Dugal. House Bill 338, Election Amendments, Representative Elison. House Bill 339, Election Ballot Amendments, Representative Elison. House Bill 414, School Bonding for Seismic Purposes, Representative Forer. House Bill 415, Protection of Athletes with Head Injuries Act, Representative Ray. House Bill 454, Open Enrollment Amendments, Representative D. Brown. House Bill 493, Campaign Finance Disclosure Amendments, Representative Powell. House Bill 500, Education Reporting Efficiency Amendments, Representative Wilcox. House Bill 503, Construction Amendments, Representative Morley. House Bill 504, Campus Safety Amendments, Representative Ipson. House Bill 505, Agricultural Code Amendments, Representative Calvez. And HJR 14, Joint Resolution urging passage of the Market Equity Act of 2011 and the Marketplace Fairness Act, Representative Elison.
Thank you, Madam Reading Clerk. These bills have been read for the first time and are referred to the Rules Committee. Representatives, we don't have any items on the consent calendar or the concurrence calendar today. It is Wednesday, so we will begin work on the Senate third reading calendar. Madam Reading Clerk.
First Substitute Senate Bill 21, Department of Environmental Quality Boards Revision, Senator Dayton. The House sponsor is Representative Wright.
Representative Wright.
Thank you very much. I would like to move the amendments under my name. It's House Floor Amendments 5.
We have that. Go ahead. Would you like to speak to that amendment?
Thank you. This is a bill that already went through the House. It was a companion bill, Senate Bill 11. Staff informed me that after it got out of here, went over to the Senate, that it didn't have the appropriate coordinating clause. If you look at the amendment, this just helps it coordinate with previous legislation, a previous bill, Senate Bill 11, that we had previously passed.
Thank you, Representative Wright. Is there discussion to the motion to amend? Seeing none, back to you for summation.
Waive summation.
Summation is waived. The motion to amend is amendment number 5, dated February 21st at 2:08 p.m. under Representative Wright's name. All in favor of the motion to amend, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes. The bill is amended. Representative Wright to the bill.
We've discussed the bill. All this is in a coordinating clause, so further discussion.
Thank you, Representative. To the bill, Representative Arendt.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to remind the body this is the bill that shrinks and dilutes the authority of the 5 citizen boards who watch out for environmental health for our citizens. It not only reduces membership, but also names the department head from the Division of Environmental Quality or someone named for that person to these boards. And frankly, it's a bill that has a lot of we have a lot of concerns. It doesn't make sense for a variety of reasons. It takes and it combines 2 positions, the engineer and the physician, which really we need both on this board. I urge you, as I did last time, to vote against this legislation. I see no reason. I don't see what it accomplishes, and in many ways it will hurt the citizen representation on the board in the future. And although I have no concerns with the current head of DEQ, I worry about where this will lead us in future when we don't have that person there, and we could have a number of situations which you can imagine with one person with so much control. So again, I urge you not to support this legislation as I did in the past.
Thank you, Representative Arendt. Is there further discussion to the bill? Seeing none, Representative Wright for summation on the bill.
Thank you. Just a reminder what this did. It changed the boards with the Department of Environmental Quality. This was done for some specific purposes. The boards were getting too large and they were not consistent with the responsibility they have. This puts the state in a better position to be consistent with the 5 boards that's in place. It makes the actions more consistent so that we'll be able to have actually better oversight by government, and particularly the consistency that we need with both sides of every issue. They'll understand the process and will actually create a system that will be much better for us in the future with less confusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wright. Voting is open on first substitute, Senate Bill 21. Representative Frank. It appears that all present have voted. Voting will be closed. First substitute, Senate Bill 21, having received 47 yes votes and 18 no votes, passes the House, will be returned to the Senate for further consideration. Madam Reading Clerk.
Senate Bill 143, Income Tax Pass-Through Entities, Senator Niederhauser. The House sponsor is Representative Painter. This bill is heard in Revenue and Taxation with a vote of 907.
Representative Painter.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What Senate Bill 143 does is folds trusts into our code as pass-through entities. They're similar in nature to LLCs and S corps.
Representative, could you bring that mic right up to your mouth?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
SB 143 folds in trusts along with LLCs and S corps. There is a good provision in here that allows, if you have a dependent beneficiary and they are under the amount that's the federal standard deduction, that trustee and that beneficiary does not have to withhold Utah income tax, and I think that's a good thing. So this basically just puts trusts and estates in the code with other similarly situated entities like S corps and LLCs, and that's basically what it does. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Painter. Is there discussion to the bill? Representative Cox.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could the sponsor explain the fiscal note on the bill?
Representative Painter, will you yield to that question?
I will. Thank you. Sure. I will try to. I think if you look at the fiscal note, it's a positive fiscal note 1 year and then a zero fiscal note thereafter. I think what the fiscal analyst is trying to identify is that out-of-state trusts that now withhold will collect that up front, and so those funds will be received by the tax commission. The second year, it shows a zero fiscal note. I have to assume that he's believing that person's behavior will change a little bit after that goes in. So that's my best explanation of what they come up with.
Thank you. I know last year there was a proposal to make all small business owners, self-employed, etc., pay quarterly income taxes to the state. That was $130 million. We basically voted that idea down. The question I guess I have on this one is why, and hopefully you can explain that. Thanks.
Sure. What they're looking at is out-of-state beneficiaries that will now be subject to withholding, and that's where the fiscal note collection comes in.
Is there further discussion to the bill? See none. Representative Painter for summation on the bill.
I'll waive. Thank you.
Summation is waived. Voting is open on Senate Bill 143. Representative Frank, Representative Assumption. It appears that all present have voted. Voting will be closed. Senate Bill 143, having received 70 yes votes, 0 no votes, passes the House, will be signed by the Speaker and returned to the Senate for the signature of the President. Representatives, we have an item on the time certain calendar. Representative D.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Personal privilege?
Personal privilege granted.
Thank you. Representatives, I would like to introduce to you today some of our law enforcement community. And We have around the circle today the family of Agent Jared Daniel Frankham, who was killed during an execution of a knock search warrant that was executed, I believe, January 4th. We have his father, Jade, his mother, Shelley, his brother, Travis, his sister-in-law, Jessica, his brother, Ben, and his brother, Gunnar, as well as their Aunt Shauna. We also have with us Officer Michael Runkles, Officer Sean Grogan, Agent Nate Hutchinson, and Agent Jason Vanderwolf. These are the officers that were involved in that incident. We have a resolution today that we'd like to present on behalf of these officers. This is a concurrent resolution. And with that, Madam Speaker, if you'll have it introduced, I will present the resolution.
Madam Reading Clerk, for items on the time certain calendar.
HCR 4, concurrent resolution honoring Weber County law enforcement officers, Representative D. This bill did not have a House Standing Committee hearing.
Representative D.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a concurrent resolution of the legislature and the governor recognizing and honoring the sacrifice not only of Agent Gerald Daniel Frankham of the Ogden City Police Department and the services of his fellow law enforcement officers Michael Runkles, Casey Burrell, Sean Grogan, Agent Nate Hutchinson, and Agent Jason Vanderwolf. I will not read the entire resolution. You have that on your computers, but it does honor these officers for their service. If I might, in introducing this resolution, I think it's important to understand that each day these men and women carry out their sworn duties as peace officers in the state of Utah. And risk is a constant companion. I don't think anyone understands better than these officers or their families here today the risk that they put themselves in every day. As they put on that badge and kiss their family goodbye and walk out the door, they do so knowing that they might be called upon that very day to step between good and evil to protect your life and mine, often at the risks of their own lives, as we have witnessed. Unspeakable tragedy brings us here today. These officers need to be honored because they secure our neighborhoods, our state, and they are something greater than any one man or one woman. They represent law enforcement officers throughout the state of Utah willing to give their all for our protection. Our tributes today may only briefly honor these brave officers, some of which have paid the ultimate sacrifice. But we will forever carry forward the spirits of those they represent in our work, in our hearts, and in our ongoing commitment to justice in the state of Utah. With that, Madam Speaker, I think there's a few people that would like to say a few things.
Thank you, Representative D. To the resolution. Representative Pitcher.
From the very moment that these people wake up in the morning until they retire in the evening, their lives are at risk. I want you to take a good look at their faces. These are the people that I have come to know as being chairman of the Weber County Sheriff's Foundation. I've come to know many of these people personally. These are people of integrity. These are people that care. They didn't go into law enforcement for financial gain. They went into law enforcement because they cared, because they could make a difference. Many times also I want to mention that is those spouses that wait at home daily for those who protect their communities. They worry. I'm sure they fret. They want to know where they are. There's a burden, an unbelievable burden that I cannot understand myself until I'm sure you are a spouse of one of these good law enforcement people that serve our communities. I am thoroughly proud that we have these type of people that step forward that are willing to protect our well-being. I ask you to join with us in this commendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Pitcher. Representative Wilcox.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is one of the most more difficult things that we do as a legislature, yet probably one of the more important. Each of these officers, as we've all read about and watched over the past few months, have had a direct impact on our personal families. Which is fitting, because when they act representing us. As we come to know them, spend a few minutes in their behind and talk to them about their own families and what they've gone through. We've watched, we've prayed, we've joined with them after this. The tragedy perhaps isn't that even as much of this happened, although it is, but it's probably more so that we haven't recognized the sacrifice that was already being made before we lost one. So for today, for all of us, thank you. Thank you for doing what you did before the tragedy happened. For standing up for us and for our families like you do for your own. Officer Roundcliffe, thank you for showing up when you weren't supposed to be there. Thank you for taking your fellow officers to the hospital, because that was the only way to save a life. Thank you for going in because we couldn't. Thank you.
Representative Perry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As one of the fellow law enforcement officers, I can tell you that this hits really close to home, and I just want to share with the Franklin family how grateful this state is for the sacrifice that your son, brother, and nephew made on that night. And I can tell you that, as I explained in the back of the room, you are part of the law enforcement family and always will be. And we don't want you to ever forget that. We know that some give all, and all give some, and some give all. And Jared's one of those that ended up giving all in behalf of the citizens of the state of Utah. We're grateful for his service. We're grateful for each of these officers. And I want to point out to my fellow representatives, there are a few officers that aren't here with us today that were there that night. One of them has a medical appointment he has to deal with, and there are other officers that were not able to be here for whatever reason. We need to make sure that as you see these officers, I would just encourage each of you to make sure that as you see them out there, thank them for the service that they provide to you, because you just never know when this may occur to any one of these officers at some time. And so, again, on behalf of the state of Utah, thank you for your service and thank you for your sacrifice.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Galvez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. When I first heard about this, the shooting and the tragedy associated with it, I was deeply saddened. And I, too, want to express my appreciation to Officer Franklin's family, for he gave the ultimate sacrifice. Having said that, this tragedy, I think, if we look at the positive side, this tragedy has brought a lot of good to our community. We've seen the community join together like I haven't seen them join together for quite some time. They've come together to show their love and appreciation for these officers. And not just for these officers, I think, but for all officers in general. It's been a great outpouring of support in the community, and I'm grateful for that. I just want to share a quote by Mia Hamm. It said, "I am a member of a team, and I rely on the team. I defer to it and sacrifice for it, because the team, not the individual, is the ultimate champion. And I am proud and grateful that these officers are our team. And I am proud and grateful that we as citizens are part of this team, because I know that these officers are there to defend us and protect us, and I'm grateful for that. So thank you for all that you do. I wish that we didn't have to have this happen to have you here to show our appreciation, but we are grateful for all that you do.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Jeremy Peterson.
Commitment, courage, and loyalty are the three things that that come to mind when I think of the work that you do. those were certainly shown on the day of the tragedy this year. We all play different roles in our lives. As legislators, we are here and we make law. Your job is to go and execute that law and to enforce those laws that we make. I just want you to know that we don't legislate lightly, and we honor and respect you for the choice that you've made to serve all of us in this state. And I just want you to know that we appreciate you. Thank you.
Representative Greenwood.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As this body knows, I've been in the law enforcement community for many years. As a matter of fact, it's probably been close to 40 years. And I can say that there's many times that you're sitting in that patrol car thinking, you know what, do the people really care? Do they really care what's going on out here? And I just hope that this shows to the law enforcement community that the people of the state of Utah do care. As my good fellow representative out of Weber County mentioned, that the turnout when we had the funeral, the people out of Ogden and throughout all of Weber County, showing their respect and showing their support for what the law enforcement people do out there. Sergeant Hutchinson, Nate, good friend of mine. I know him personally, and I just can't say enough about him. And I didn't work with the other officers. I don't know them as well as I know you, Nate. But I know this by working in the law enforcement community for almost 40 years. These are fantastic people. I have not really run into any law enforcement officer in my years in law enforcement that is not a great guy or gal. So I would just like to stand and show my appreciation for the service that the law enforcement officers in the state of Utah gives to the community. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Greenwood. Representative Frower.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also rise in strong support of this resolution. The group that shares the floor with us this morning is, in my opinion, the epitome of people that serve with integrity, honesty, and with the full intent of public service, something that most of us can only hope to emulate at some point in our life. I happen to have many good friends here on this floor with me this morning. I have some that I've just met. I can say without question that this tragedy that has come to our city has, in some respects, made us look at the public service that's given, look at the people that protect our rights that are on the streets every day, and give us the utmost respect and appreciation for your service. I happen to have a close relative, a nephew that's a detective with Ogden Police Department. So I have some insight into the dedication and really the mindset that these officers have and take to the street, which is not for themselves, not to protect themselves, but fully to protect our rights. And let me just say from the bottom of my heart, I honor you this day and for this day forward. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Representative. Seeing no further lights, Representative D.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think it's overwhelming to me to see the support of the law enforcement community, the brotherhood and sisterhood of these men and women who wear the uniform to protect us. Some others that are here with us today, we have Mayor Ritchie from Roy is in the gallery. Mayor Caldwell is with us today from Ogden City. Chief Wenham from Roy. Chief Korginski, Acting Chief from Ogden City, and Sheriff Terry Thompson also here today in support of these men and women. Having attended that funeral and witnessing that special day, over 500 law enforcement vehicles in a processional, the D Event Center full. Law enforcement officers from as far away as Chicago coming to pay tribute to those that were involved in this particular tragedy. We thank them all. We do this because our heroes, and they are heroes, should not be forgotten. Every day they face violent criminals. They face daily human tragedy that takes its toll on each and every one of them. Today we pay tribute not only to these heroes, but also to their families. And you will always be remembered, and you will always be part of us. After the vote is taken today, I would like to present a copy of this resolution to these officers and to Officer Frankham's family, along with a new state of Utah flag as a token of our appreciation, grateful hearts for what you do for us. Rededicate ourselves to the cause which Officer Frankham gave his last full measure of devotion. Perhaps an unknown author puts it best. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind always be at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. The rains fall soft on the fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Voting is open on HCR 4. Appears that all present have voted. Voting will be closed. HCR 4, having received 73 yes votes and 0 no votes, passes the House and will be transmitted to the Senate for its consideration. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you for your great sacrifices. Very much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you, Representatives. Speaker announces a Rules Committee meeting. The Rules Committee will be meeting in the Majority Caucus Room. Madam Reading Clerk, for items on the Senate third reading calendar.
Senate Bill 35, New Motor Vehicle Warranties Act Amendment, Senator Maine. The House sponsor is Representative Dee Brown. This was heard in transportation with a vote of 10, 2, and 2.
Representative Derek Brown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill, I think, may highlight the contrast between things that matter and things that don't. So I hesitate almost to do this now. SB 35 is a priority bill for Senator Maine. It involves vehicle warranties and specifically deals with recreational vehicles. The genesis of this bill involves a number of individuals who had issues with recreational vehicles that could not be fixed, and over a period of time there were difficulties between dealers and the manufacturers. This is the result of, she has spent over a year working with the manufacturers and dealers. They have all come together and agreed on basically a process. It's a mediation process is all it is. And let me just walk you through briefly what it is. It is after an individual has an issue with the recreational vehicle, they'll notify the manufacturer in writing of that issue, or as the bill calls it, nonconformity. And this will be addressed, and to the extent that it is not addressed, and after 4 different attempts are made, if it is not addressed, then at that point it's submitted for mediation. And this only deals with walls, the subfloor, and the roofing. Some of the changes that the Senate requested to be put in are 2 specific changes. One is that the mediator be part of the consumer arbitration program for recreational vehicles, and also that it take place in the county in which it was purchased. And so ultimately, the mediation process will ideally resolve any situation with the purchase, and it is non-binding, so it does not foreclose other opportunities or avenues of recourse. And because it involves 4 different attempts, I have a hard time imagining that this, frankly, will be used, and if so, it will be very sparingly, because generally it can be addressed, I would think, by the 4th time. So ultimately, this just sets out a process by which any sort of defect will be resolved, and it represents a lot of work where the manufacturers and the dealers have come together and worked at length to design this process. So this is the process that they have all agreed on and feel comfortable with, and that is the bill.
Thank you, Representative Brown. Is there discussion to the bill? Seeing none, back to you for summation.
I'll waive. Thank you.
Thank you. Summation is waived. Voting is open on Senate Bill 35. Representative Dugal. Appears that all present have voted. Voting will be closed. Senate Bill 35, having received 61 yes votes, 11 no votes, passes the House, will be signed by the Speaker and returned to the Senate for the signature of the President. Madam Reading Clerk.
First substitute Senate Bill 115, Historical District Creation Requirement, Senator Niederhauser. The House sponsor is Representative King. This bill was heard in political subdivisions with a vote of 10-0-2.
Representative King.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
this body may remember that last year we had come before us the question of historic designations of historic districts in the Yale Crest area in Salt Lake City. I voted against that bill, spoke against it, worked hard to see it defeated. I live in the Yale Crest area, and Representative Briscoe and I represent that area. We passed that bill, and it put in place a moratorium for a year on designation of historic districts, and it put some restrictions on the ability of homeowners to tear their homes down. At the time, I felt strongly that that was an overreach on the part of the legislature. However, the legislature spoke. And that's the bill that's in place. That's the law that's in place today. And under the circumstances, when Senator Niederhauser came to me and said, would you be interested in being the House sponsor for this bill, that extends that moratorium 1 year to allow the parties in Salt Lake City, the residents of the neighborhood, and others who have an interest in this issue to continue to talk. Would you be interested in being the sponsor for that bill? I said yes. And the reason is we have already addressed this issue in this body, and I think that it's in the interests of the individuals in the Yale Crest neighborhood, in Salt Lake City, and in the state as a whole, to move forward productively in a way that will allow for constructive discussion to try and solve a problem. And the problem is, how do we resolve competing interests between private property owners? And the competing interests are some property owners want their neighborhood to pretty much stay the way it is, and some property owners say, I want to do whatever I want with my property. The balance between those two competing interests is a difficult thing to reach. The process continues. This bill will allow an additional year extension in the time frame that's currently in place in the Yale Crest area to have restrictions on teardowns, to have restrictions on the ability to move forward with a historic district designation. I think that it's a good bill. I'd ask for your vote in its favor.
Thank you, Representative King. To the bill, Representative Nielsen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will the sponsor yield to a question?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Go ahead.
My question is this: is there anything that the city is going to do over the next period of extension, next year or so, under this, if this bill passes? Is there anything that they will be doing that they could not do without seeking leave of the state?
No, I think that they can go ahead and continue to talk, but they can't take concrete action in the next year if the bill passes to move forward the work of creating a historic district in the Yale Crest area. That's the restriction that's in place. And particular landowners, particular property owners in the Yale Crest neighborhood have some restrictions on their ability to completely demolish their structures.
So if I understand it, I believe the intent of the city is to study this further and delay a final determination until one more year. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know that delay a final determination for one more year is an accurate characterization. I think what the bill tries to do is to put in place an opportunity for the city, the planning department of the city, the council members of the city, the mayor, and the residents of Salt Lake City neighborhood affected, the Yale Crest neighborhood, give them an opportunity to continue to work to try to come to some common ground, come to some agreement that resolves the Yale Crest issue amicably as opposed to through either legislation or some other method.
Thank you very much. I'm still seeking a role for the state here. I am convinced that the city has the ability and the willingness to deliberate and make a decision. Clearly there's an interest on the part of some people to have a state law or some state procedures that would govern the creation of historic districts. That's a separate issue and I think would be run under separate legislation. So I can't find a proper role of the state here, and I would oppose it. I think that Salt Lake City can, will, and should do the right thing. Thank you.
Representative Butterfield.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would rise in support of this bill.
I try very hard to advocate for local control as well as the rights of property owners. I think what we have here is a situation where those two, we're trying to strike a very delicate balance, and I applaud the sponsor for bringing this bill. The role of the state, I would suggest, representatives, is to ensure, when property rights are at stake, is to ensure that those property rights are carefully considered. And I think that's what this bill does. It grants the owners and the city more time to find a resolution. And this bill, if you will, essentially offers that offers those property owners guarantee that they are going to have a fair process and a fair hearing. And so I would encourage you to and suggest that this bill respects both local control and property rights. I'd encourage you to support this bill to support both that process and both of those interests.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Hughes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also rise in support of this bill. I appreciate the work of the House sponsor from Salt Lake County. You know, a lot of times the issues that we address, the jurisdictions that are impacted, the best thing that people can do is put stakeholders around the table. This bill allows for those conversations, those dialogues to continue, and I am convinced that the more people have that opportunity to talk, share their perspectives, good policy, good public policy is the product. And so I support this bill and appreciate the bipartisan nature in which it's been presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Hughes. Representative Derek Brown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to draw attention to the fact that when we have the sponsors are Senator Niederhauser and Representative King, I mean, this shows that the individuals working on this really are reaching across the aisle and trying to strike a balance. Currently, this bill, I think it was passed out of committee unanimously, and what it does is it just gives time. It gives time for the groups that have the stake here: Salt Lake City, the League of Cities and Towns, the Association of Realtors, property rights coalitions, those groups to come together and work this out. And those are the appropriate groups to be working on this issue. And so I would recommend your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Briscoe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I got over 300 emails on this issue last year. The good representative from Yellcrest lives in this neighborhood and takes 17th East. If it's west of 17th East, it's my district. If it's east of 17th East, it's in his district. I'm with the representative from Bountiful. I'm struggling to find a state role here. Really wonder about the state's authority when we're delving down into neighborhood issues. This may end up being a good thing. When I did meet with differing groups, this has been suggested. I met with representatives in the neighborhood who wanted to proceed, had started to proceed with an historic district designation. I met with representatives of groups who were vehemently opposed. I told both of them, you two have to talk. The two groups have to get together because the best solutions aren't going to come from the state legislature on an issue involving a neighborhood. They're going to come from the people who live in the neighborhood. And by voting to extend this moratorium for one more year, there were historic designations process going on in Salt Lake City before Yellcrest ever started theirs that will be now on hold for 2 years. So I'll reluctantly vote yes.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Barris.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I, too, am a defender of property rights, and I recognize that the people who live in that area, who have homes that they would like to be able to do things with from the standpoint of their ownership and their private property, they have that right, and it's a very fundamental right that underscores the things that upon which we believe in our country. There are those also that recognize the importance of historic districts. The question has been asked, what is the state role? And quite frankly, I think many of these decisions should be done at a local level. But from the standpoint of a state role, since it has been elevated to that point, I do know that the Senate sponsor during the next interim is planning to coordinate and organize discussions between the property owners, between the League of Cities and Towns, between the real estate community, for the very purpose of trying to lay out a statewide role that we may have as a state, or policies that we can put into place to help the local planning on a local basis. So I would also stand in support of the bill to give this time for that to occur this summer during the interim. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Barras. Representative McKay.
I'd just like to stand and speak in support of this bill. Again, while I recognize a good representative from Bountiful's contention that this is a local issue, it is the local issue, or is the local entities before us that have asked us to give them this extension. And so I think we truly are expressing local intention when we're passing this bill and letting it go. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Newbold.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is an issue that when we heard this last year, I was very conflicted as to which way to vote and was not going to vote in support of this legislation. But as I read multiple emails coming from citizens who lived in that area who were concerned about the new restrictions that should a historical district be created, that the city would then impose upon them if they wanted to do any remodeling. I believe we have two competing rights, and we have some personal property rights that I believe are really important, and I think that those in the end weighed out in supporting just a moratorium to give the two sides time to come together. If we're not there yet, I would very much speak in support of extending that time.
Thank you, Representative Newbold. Seeing no further lights, Representative King for summation on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would just note that this bill only applies to Salt Lake City, and the bill is a compromise negotiated with Salt Lake City, the League of Cities and Towns, the Utah Association of Realtors, and the Utah Property Rights Coalition. The Senate sponsor, Senator Niederhauser, will be leading efforts during the interim to work together with the League of Cities and Towns, Salt Lake City, and other interested parties to craft a statewide solution for the creation of historic districts that take into account both legitimate interests that we're talking about, the legitimate interests of the individuals in a neighborhood to the character of that neighborhood and the private property rights of individual property owners. So I'd encourage your support of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative King. Voting is open on first substitute, Senate Bill 115. It appears that all present have voted. Voting will be closed. First substitute, Senate Bill 115, having received 62 yes votes, 6 no votes, passes the House, will be signed by the Speaker and returned to the Senate for the signature of the President. Representative Gibson.
Representatives, personal privilege.
Personal privilege granted.
Thank you. Representatives, I have standing beside me what prime female genetics can produce. Much like many of the other my male counterparts in this body would feel the same way about their wives. This is my 7-year-old son, Cameron, Cameron is in Chinese immersion. He loves to play basketball and soccer and give his dad a hard time. And if you'll welcome him here, that would be great. Secondly, we have for us today up in the gallery, if they'll stand. This is the 40th anniversary of the Utah annual, the annual Utah All-State High School Art Show. There were over 966 works of art presented this year from 93 schools. 345 were selected for exhibition at the Springville Art Museum, February 22nd through March 23rd. That is my district. If you want to come, I'd be glad to go with you there. You've been presented a book on your desk. If you'll turn to page 9, you'll be able to find which high schools and which students from the high schools that you may represent and the awards that were presented to them in their categories. These young ladies and young men work very hard in the arts. It is because of programs that we fund, such as POPs, that allows us to continue. I would hope that you would reach out to these young winners in your various areas of the state that you represent, and also welcome these young people to the Capitol today.
Representative Wheatley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Personal privilege.
Personal privilege granted.
Today we are joined by some special guests in the gallery. We have some diverse business owners who have arrived at the state capitol for Diverse Business Day at the legislature. The U.S. Small Business Administration indicates nearly 10.4 million firms are owned by women, employing more than 12.8 million people and generating $1.9 trillion in sales. And most recent data from the U.S. Census Bureau shows that there are 6 million minority-owned businesses. Diverse business owners have made progress by being intelligent and courageous leaders. As Walt Disney once said, if you can dream it, you can do it. These individuals are living the dream by contributing economically to the state of Utah, and we want to thank them for their efforts. If they would please stand and recognize them.
Thank you, Representative. Representative D. Senator Lee is here. We need to go to committee of the whole.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would move that we resolve ourselves into a committee of the whole.
Thank you. The motion is to resolve ourselves into the committee of the whole. All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion passes. We're in the committee of the whole. Please join me in welcoming Senator Mike Lee.
And Representative Litvak and all representatives, it's a pleasure to be with you today. I'm honored to represent Utah in the United States Senate, and I hope and trust that by now you've all received my annual report to the Utah legislature. And I hope that you've memorized substantial portions of it. You know, it's fairly light reading, but, you know, I hope you enjoy it. I think this is one of the most important functions that I perform. It's emblematic of the fact that in addition to representing Utah's 3 million residents, I also represent the state of Utah as a state. This is why I intend to produce a report every single year in person and in writing so that you can keep tabs on what I'm doing to represent the state. You ultimately are the gatekeepers of what happens in our government. You are the government of the state of Utah, and one of my jobs is to represent those very interests. It's been an interesting year transitioning into my new role. Even toward the close of my first year in the Senate, occasionally people didn't recognize me in the Senate chamber. I'll get carded periodically as I enter the Senate chamber. They'll stop me thinking that I'm perhaps a staffer or an intern, a geriatric intern, but an intern nonetheless. Then I have to produce my card. This usually allows me to get into the chamber. Then I learned a little trick. There's a lapel pin that they give to all senators so that the security staff can recognize us. I'll point to the pin. I've come to call it my sorry senator pin because when they card me, I point to it, they say, sorry, senator, and then they let me in. Not too long ago, toward the end of last year, I was in the Senate chamber, and as you've seen it, there are desks much like these here. As I was standing in the aisle in between two votes, I had one arm leaning ever so gently on one of the old Senate chamber desks. At that point, one of the members of the Sergeant-at-Arms staff, the people who are the guardians of the chamber, came up to me and said, "Will you please stop leaning on the senator's desk?" Now, I'm a well-behaved Utah County boy, and I respond well to authority. I promptly stood up and said, "I'm terribly sorry. I didn't realize I was leaning on it." He then proceeded to grill me. He said, "Are you with the minority?" And I didn't know what he meant. I asked, "Do you mean with this vote? Did I vote with the Republicans on this vote?" I wasn't sure what he meant. Do you work for the minority leader?" And I thought it was kind of a philosophical question. Well, I work for the people of Utah. I affiliate with Mitch McConnell as our minority leader. "Are you part of the minority leader's staff?" And then I realized, oh, he didn't see the pin. I pointed to the "sorry, Senator" pin. He still didn't get it. Finally, I uttered words that I still feel uncomfortable uttering at times. I said, "No, I'm Senator Lee." "What?" I'm Senator Lee. At that point, all the color drained from his face, and he said, "I'm terribly sorry. My name is Steve if you want to report me." And then he promptly walked out of the chamber. I felt really bad for the guy. I tried to go after him to tell him, "Hey, it's okay, no big deal." But he was gone. I still say hi to him every time, and I always remember his name. But it occurred to me that in many ways represents what we have to do as legislators, what we have to do as senators. Sometimes we have to stand up and rightfully assert that which is rightfully ours, whether in a legislative office or whether as a citizen going to the voting booth and making a decision. That which is rightfully ours has to be declared as such, has to be asserted as such. So we as Utahns, and I as a U.S. Senator representing the state of Utah, at times have to stand up and assert things which are and ought properly to be rightfully ours, including our right not to be told by the federal government that its executive branch has the right indefinitely to detain us without trial. The fact that we need... Thank you. We need to assert the right not to be told by the federal government where to go to the doctor and how to pay for it. The fact that we ought to have a right to have a federal government that balances its budget every year, just as you so faithfully do here in the state legislature. That we have a right as citizens, which we ought to assert, not to have our religious institutions bullied by an all-powerful federal government that knows no limits on its boundaries and is even unwilling at times to respect the free exercise of religious expression. The fact that we have a right to develop and gain access to our public lands so as to benefit our public school system, so as to make possible the development of what should be and what I predict one day will be the greatest public education system in the entire United States of America. If these things go unasserted, just as our rights to vote as legislators go unasserted, they won't do us any good. That's why we're here. That's why you and I are both engaged in this legislative process. That's why we're engaged with our constituents every day about talking about those rights that we want to champion, those rights that we will assert. That's what I'm trying to do every single day in Washington, and I hope you can read all about it in this report. In the meantime, I'd like to use the balance of my time with you today to answer any questions you may have. And so let's turn it over to the Speaker, and we'll proceed from there.
Thank you, Senator. Might I just personally express to you my thanks for, I don't know if everyone knows, but my daughter works for Senator Lee, my other daughter, in Washington, D.C., and she
does a darn good job, I might add. Sorry to interrupt you.
She loves working for you, and thank you for taking such good care of her. Representative Ellison.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate your time and for all that you do for the citizens of the state of Utah. There's a bill currently before the U.S. Senate, SB 1832, the Marketplace Fairness Act. If passed, I believe that would give this body greater states' rights to determine our sales tax collection on remote sellers. Would also allow us to broaden the base and lower the rate if we so desired. Just wondered what your position on the passage of that bill is.
This is something of a moving target. As I understand it, that same bill, which has undergone some recent revisions, is undergoing even more revisions right now. In light of judicial precedent that has made it impossible for states to deal with things like this, a lot of people have been calling on Congress to reform this and to lift the due process and commerce clause related restrictions that have previously prohibited states from imposing taxes outside of the very narrow and unwieldy framework of North Dakota versus Quill. I do think something will pass. I don't know whether it will be that very bill in its current form, but I think some version of that will pass either in this Congress or the next, and I've been an active participant in those discussions.
Thank you. Representative Litvak.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Senator Lee, for being here. As someone who was pretty young when I was first elected and had some similar experiences here, being stopped at those doors, may I suggest a beard? It has helped.
I think it's a fantastic idea. I should do that. The day I was sworn in, they took a picture of me, the Salt Lake Tribune, and there was a shadow cast by my hand as I was being sworn in by Joe Biden, Vice President Biden, and the shadow made it look as if I had a very low-hanging sideburn, sort of like Cousin Moe's on The Office. If you
I'm not sure sideburn will have the same effect, but whatever you wish.
I'll try the beard. I'll try the beard next time.
I do have a question, Senator. I asked the same question yesterday of Congressman Matheson. I'm glad to hear you say when you talk and you come here and talk about representing all Utahns. All Utahns, a lot of Utahns on both sides of the aisle and party affiliation are very frustrated by the partisanship that we see on a regular basis. And I'm curious in terms of your experience and how you understand the partisanship there and things that you can do to be the type of leader that I think all of us desire, regardless of party, to see individuals come together, address the issues that are important to us as a nation, as a state, as a community, in a cooperative and a collaborative manner.
It's a great question that I'm happy to address. Despite what people often hear from the news media, bipartisanship in Washington is not, in fact, dead. We try all the time to agree, and we often do. Those ones, of course, don't make many headlines, but it is not dead. The fact that there is sometimes either gridlock or the appearance of gridlock is the inevitable outcome of the fact that not everyone agrees. And there are some pretty significant philosophical disagreements there, as here, as to what the proper function of government in general and that government in particular is or ought to be. But it is alive and well, and I've done everything. I've gone out of my way and will continue to do so to work with colleagues from across the aisle. For instance, I have worked closely with some of my Democratic colleagues, including Joe Manchin from West Virginia and including my cousin Mark Udall from Colorado on balanced budget amendment issues. I fundamentally believe that what we need is to bring about a state of affairs in which it's no longer news when Washington balances its budget. You all do that here every year. You do that with a lot of bipartisan agreement, and you balance every single year. I think Washington ought to be required to do the same thing. My cousin, Senator Mark Udall, also agrees. Unfortunately, our other cousin, Senator Tom Udall from New Mexico, does not yet agree. We're working on him. Interestingly enough, we had 47 Republicans vote to support the same a single balanced budget amendment, the Hatch-Lee balanced budget amendment, which Senator Hatch and I introduced. We had 20 Democrats all vote to support a Democratic counterpart to that, sponsored by Senator Mark Udall. You add those up, and you have the 67 votes necessary to move a balanced budget amendment out of the United States Senate and to submit it to the states for ratification. So one of the ideas that I've raised with Mark Udall and that I hope to continue to pursue with my Democratic colleagues is let's find a way to put those in a single legislative vehicle and vote to propose both of them to the states with a provision saying whichever one the states choose to ratify first will take effect. That's one of many examples of bipartisanship that I can point to. I'm also co-sponsoring legislation. Senator Dianne Feinstein and I are co-sponsoring legislation to protect U.S. citizens from the kind of indefinite detention without trial that I referred to. that was made an issue, a prominent issue, most recently in the NDAA, which I voted against. This is not unusual. I work with my Democratic colleagues all the time. I can't even count off the top of my head how many times I've worked with them. We don't agree on everything, but we work anxiously and eagerly to find areas where we do agree.
Thank you. We have one more. Representative Galvez.
Thank you, Senator. First of all, I just want to say thank you for this wonderful reading material. It shows that you've been busy at work. Also, thank you for setting up an office here at the Capitol. It's been nice to be able to have a place to be able to go and communicate with your representatives. So thank you for what you're doing. We appreciate it. My question relates to the Sound Money Promotion Act that you and Senator DeMint and Senator Powell are sponsoring. As you know, in Utah, we've been trying to focus as well on a sound money and getting back to some sound money principles. Just wondering if maybe you could enlighten us and share with us a little bit about your Promotion Act and what you're doing back on the federal level.
Sure. Prompted in large part by action that took place last year here in the Utah legislature, we've introduced federal legislation that would remove the capital gains tax implications of using gold and silver coin for a transaction. People ought to have the option, if they want to transact business in gold and silver coin and not have to pay a tax on that just because they're exchanging a different form of currency. It's interesting that even though the Constitution prohibits the states from making any form of money legal tender other than gold and silver coin, in effect, we've made it impossible for gold and silver coin to be used as legal tender in financial transactions. It's kind of backwards. It's almost a bizarro world. But, one thing that we could do is lift this capital gains hit that prevents people from being able to do that. I think that's a fair approach. It's slowly but very gradually gaining some momentum, and I intend to continue to push it. This is part of the economic freedom that I think Americans deserve and that I'll continue to assert on their behalf.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Thank you for coming to speak to us. And I know the Senate eagerly awaits you, so we'll let you go. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Representative D.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would move that we resolve ourselves from the Committee of the Whole.
Thank you. Motion is to dissolve the Committee of the Whole. All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion passes. The Committee of the Whole is dissolved. Madam Reading Clerk, for items on the Senate third reading calendar.
SJR 1, Alzheimer's State Plan Joint Resolution, Senator Morgan. The House sponsor is Representative Moss. This bill was heard in Workforce Services with a vote of 6-0-1.
Representative Moss.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last year, we passed legislation that created an Alzheimer's State Plan Task Force under the direction of Senator Morgan, with the help of the Alzheimer's Association of Utah and Nels Holmgren, Director, and the Director of the Division of Aging and Adult Services, Nels Holmgren, and Nick Zullo. That task force worked throughout the year, holding meetings across the state in Cache, Davis, Salt Lake, Carbon, and Washington counties. Well, we held those meetings. We listened to the public. They came and told us many, many stories of the needs that they have as caregivers for their loved ones with Alzheimer's and other related dementia. After these meetings, we did incredible work with healthcare professionals, their families, caregivers, and those suffering with disease, and came up with a booklet that looks like this, that outlines the state 5-year plan. This resolution today expresses support for this 5-year state plan, outlines the plan, and will be used as a working document for the next 5 years. As we all know, Alzheimer's disease is one of the most devastating of diseases, if not the most devastating disease one can suffer. It robs individuals of their minds and personalities. I don't think anyone here is exempt from the effects of that disease in some way or another, family, friends, extended family. On a personal note, Senator Morgan's mother died 2 years ago of Alzheimer's disease. My mother suffers from another form of dementia, vascular dementia. Utah has the highest per capita prevalence of this disease in the nation, and we're expected to have a 127% increase in the next 10 to 15 years. That means in about 2 decades, we'll have over 50,000 people with Alzheimer's and other dementias. It's due in large part to our enormously large aging population, and it's something we need to prepare for as families and as healthcare professionals also. Alzheimer's and other brain diseases which cause dementia are not a natural part of aging. Research now shows they can be prevented or delayed. There is great hope for the citizens of our state. So the 5 goals of this state plan are that we'll create a dementia-aware Utah by publicizing up-to-date disease and care information, including ways to delay and reduce risks, increase access to a timely diagnosis, treatments, and support to improve the health and dignity of those with dementia, acknowledge the importance of family caregivers by empowering them and providing them with support and guidance throughout the disease course. One of the ladies that came and spoke at one of our meetings up in Davis County is a neighbor of mine, and she said, all we want is hope. 2 weeks ago, they held the funeral for her husband that was actively teaching handicapped students at Hartvigsen School, Johnstone, until he started having the onset of Alzheimer's 2 years ago. The family caregivers are very, very important, and they provide $1.8 billion of unpaid caregiving in Utah. But these families are really in need of respite care and other things that we as a state can help provide by planning for that now. We can also create a dementia-competent workforce by increasing the care capacity and competency of the trained professionals that work as care providers. In this state, we have a great need for more doctors to go into the field of gerontology. We have a lack in that area. And we also need to enlist world-class research that will bring about new treatments and more participation from patients, as well as federal, state, and private research dollars. One of the doctors that's heading up such an effort is Norman Foster, the director of University of Utah's Center for Alzheimer's Care, Imaging, and Research. We need many more doctors like Dr. Foster. So I would very much like your support on this important resolution, which will be followed with another bill that takes pieces of the 5-year state plan and puts those into statutes. So I hope that I can have your support on this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Moss. Is there discussion to the resolution? Representative Draxler?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will the sponsor yield to a question?
Representative Moss, will you yield?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Representative, which department of state government or which agency is coordinating with you in this effort?
The Division of Aging and Adult Services.
And I noticed there's no fiscal impact noted on the fiscal note, and so it looks as though they're going to be working with you within the bounds of their current budget. Is that correct?
That's correct. This is, of course, just a resolution, but at this point, they will be working with us under their existing budget, yes.
Thank you. I just speak in favor of this resolution. It is a serious public health issue, and when we can have this kind of a coordinated effort without impact to our state budget, this is a good thing, and I urge your support for the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Draxler. Seeing no further lights, Representative Moss for summation.
I'll waive.
Thank you. Summation is waived. Voting is open on SJR 1. Appears that all present have voted. Voting will be closed. SJR 1, having received 51 yes votes, 19 no votes, passes the House, will be signed by the Speaker and returned to the Senate for the signature of the President. Madam Reading Clerk.
Senate Bill 168, Uniform Disposition of Community Property Rights at Death Act. Senator Hilliard. The House sponsor is Representative Snow. This bill was heard in judiciary with a vote of 805.
Representative Snow.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move to circle, please.
Motion is to circle. Would you like to speak to that?
Question has come up with respect to this bill and its implications on title. I'd like to work those issues out and then bring it back.
Thank you. Is there discussion to the motion to circle? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion passes. The bill is circled. Madam Reading Clerk.
SJR 7, Joint Rules Resolution on Priority Status for Bills. Senator Dayton. The House sponsor is Representative Harper. This bill did not have a standing committee hearing.
Yes, it did.
This bill was heard in the Rules Committee with a vote of 801.
Thank you, Madam Reading Clerk. Representative Harper.
Thank you. When we changed our rules last year to change the priority status where you had the different implementations of time, the first Thursday in December, the first Thursday in January, and then first Thursday of the session to go through and have your priority bills. Discussion came up about what happens to interim committees as to bills that they want to have drafted as priorities. This bill clearly says that a request for legislation can be prioritized by a majority vote of an interim committee and have the same weight as one of our 3 priority bills. So a chairman of a committee can't do it. It has to be on action of the standing committee, and that's what this rule change does.
Thank you, Representative Harper. Is there discussion to the bill? Seeing none, back to you for summation.
I'll waive summation.
Thank you. Summation is waived. Voting is open on SJR 7. Appears that all present have voted. Voting will be closed. SJR 7, having received 73 yes votes, 0 no votes, passes the House, will be signed by the Speaker and returned to the Senate for the signature of the President. Representatives, that concludes our work on the Senate third reading calendar for this morning. Madam Reading Clerk, for communications from the Senate.
February 22, 2012. Madam Speaker, the Senate passed House Bill 97, Racketeering Amendment by Representative Seelig, and HCR 4, Concurrent Resolution Honoring Weber County Law Enforcement Officers by Representative D. These bills have been signed by the President and are transmitted for the signature of the Speaker. Respectfully, Leslie McLean, Secretary of the Senate.
Thank you, Madam Reading Clerk. HCR 4 and HB 97 will be signed by the Speaker and referred to staff for enrolling. Madam Reading Clerk.
February 22, 2012. Madam Speaker, the Senate passed Senate Bill 60, Traffic Accident Emergency Response Fees by Senator Adams. Passed as substituted. First substitute Senate Bill 101, Acupuncture Licensing Act Amendments by Senator Hinkins. Passed as substituted and amended First Substitute Senate Bill 127, Controlled Substances Prescriber Training by Senator Jones. Passed Senate Bill 197, Attorney General Amendments by Senator Jay Stevenson. And passed as amended Senate Bill 273, Surplus Property Amendments by Senator McAdams. These bills are transmitted for consideration. Respectfully, Leslie McLean, Secretary of the Senate.
Thank you, Madam Reading Clerk. These bills will be considered read for the first time and are referred to the Rules Committee. Madam Reading Clerk, for Rules Committee report.
February 22, 2012. Madam Speaker, the Rules Committee recommends the following bills and resolutions be assigned to standing committees. House Bill 362, Senate Bill 192, House Bill 156, House Bill 381, House Bill 392, House Bill 398, House Bill 500, House Bill 501, House Bill 341, First Substitute Senate Bill 55, House Bill 456, Senate Bill 236, HCR 12, House Bill 429, House Bill 491, HJR 14, SJR 18, Senate Bill 27, House Bill 455, HCR 15, and Senate Bill 256. Respectfully, Wayne Harper, Chair.
Representative Harper.
I move adoption of the committee report.
Thank you. The motion is to adopt the committee report. Is there discussion to the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion passes. The committee report is adopted. The Speaker assigns the following bills to the following committees: to Business and Labor, House Bill 362 and Senate Bill 192; to Education, House Bill 156, House Bill 381, House Bill 392, House Bill 398, House Bill 500, and House Bill 501; to Government Operations, House Bill 341; to Judiciary, First Substitute, Senate Bill 55; to Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice, House Bill 456 and Senate Bill 236; to Natural Resources, Agriculture, and Environment, HCR 12; to Political Subdivisions, House Bill 429 and House Bill 491; to Public Utilities and Technology, HJR 14 and SJR 18; to Revenue and Taxation, Senate Bill 27; to Transportation, House Bill 455; and to Workforce Services and Community and Economic Development, HCR 15 and Senate Bill 256. Madam Reading Clerk, for standing committee reports.
February 22, 2012. Madam Speaker, the Government Operations Committee reports a favorable recommendation on Senate Bill 57, issuance of blasting permits by Senator Okerlund, and recommends it be placed on the consent calendar. Respectfully, Craig Powell, Committee Chair.
Representative Menlove, can I get a motion on the committee report?
Motion to accept the committee report.
Thank you. Motion is to adopt the committee report. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion passes. The committee report is adopted. Senate Bill 57 will be considered read for the second time and placed on the consent calendar. Madam Reading Clerk.
February 22, 2012. Madam Speaker, the Political Subdivisions Committee reports a favorable recommendation on Senate Bill 122, Urban Farming Assessment Act by Senator Niederhauser, and Senate Bill 167, Children's Justice Center Program Amendments by Senator Okerlund, and due to fiscal impact, recommends it be referred to the Rules Committee for prioritization. Respectfully, Arkert Webb, Committee Chair.
Representative Edwards.
Motion to adopt the committee report.
Thank you. Motion is to adopt the committee report. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion passes. The committee report is adopted. Senate Bill 122 will be considered read for the second time and placed on the third reading calendar. Senate Bill 167 will be considered read for the second time and will be returned to the Rules Committee due to fiscal impact. Madam Reading Clerk.
February 22, 2012. Madam Speaker, the Revenue and Taxation Committee reports a favorable recommendation on House Bill 365, revisions to tax by Representative Dugal with amendments, and a favorable recommendation on Senate Bill 58, property tax valuation amendments by Senator Niederhauser. Senate Bill 62, cigarette tax restricted account revisions by Senator Hilliard, and due to fiscal impact, recommends it be referred to the Rules Committee for prioritization. A favorable recommendation on First Substitute Senate Bill 116, Armed Forces Property Tax Exemption by Senator Robles, and recommends Third Substitute Senate Joint Resolution 8 Joint resolution on property tax exemption for military personnel by Senator Robles be replaced and favorably recommends for substitute Senate Joint Resolution 8. Joint resolution on property tax exemption for military personnel, and due to unknown fiscal impact, recommends the substitute be referred to the Rules Committee pending completion of a fiscal note. Respectfully, Patrick Painter, Committee Chair.
Representative Painter.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Motion to adopt the committee report.
Thank you. The motion is to adopt the committee report. Is there discussion to that motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Okay. Any opposed say nay. Motion passes. The committee report is adopted. House Bill 365, Senate Bill 58, and first substitute Senate Bill 116 will be considered read for the second time and placed on their respective third reading calendar. Senate Bill 62 will be considered read for the second time and returned to the Rules Committee due to fiscal impact. Fourth substitute SJR 8 will be considered read for the second time and returned to the Rules Committee for a fiscal note. Madam Reading Clerk.
February 22nd, 2012. Madam Speaker, the Workforce Services and Community and Economic Development Committee reports a favorable recommendation on House Bill 184, Study of Regulatory Environment for Alcohol Policy by Representative Litvak with amendments. A favorable recommendation on Senate Bill 56, Homeowner Association Reserve Account Amendments by Senator Urquhart, and recommends to be placed on the consent calendar. A favorable recommendation on Senate Bill 166, Statutory Construction Computation of Time by Senator Valentine, and recommends to be placed on the consent calendar. And a favorable recommendation on first substitute Senate Bill 233, Name Change for Appropriations Subcommittees by Senator Hilliard, and recommends to be placed on the consent calendar. Respectfully, Jim Byrd, Committee Chair.
Representative Byrd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Motion to accept the committee report.
Thank you. The motion is to adopt the committee report. Is there discussion to that motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion passes. The committee report is adopted. House Bill 184 will be considered read for the second time and placed on the third reading calendar. Senate Bill 56, Senate Bill 166, and first substitute Senate Bill 233 will be considered read for the second time and placed on the consent calendar. That's it. Representative Edwards for the third House.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We have a couple of announcements. First of all, for those who have not noticed, it is Aggie Ice Cream Day. They have been in the kitchen this morning, and they will be back in the kitchen from 2 to 4 this afternoon. We have a lunch with the Utah Association of Realtors at noon in the Rotunda, a reception sponsored by Energy Solutions from 3 to 5:30 outside the Gold Room, and there are 2 events this evening. I'll just announce those after our afternoon floor time. And that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Litvak, nothing? Representative Menlove, I need a motion to recess until 2 p.m.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I make a motion that we recess until 2 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you. The motion is to recess until 2 p.m. All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion passes. We are recessed.